Hi, Bruno here, welcome to Spainguru. Spain is one of the few countries in the world that has this tax, the Spanish wealth tax. But what is it? The wealth tax, or impuesto de patrimonio, is a tax that taxes personal wealth and whose management corresponds to each of the comunidades autónomas in Spain. There are 17 comunidades autónomas, for example, Madrid, Andalucía, or Catalonia. If you reside in Spain for over 183 days, with a Spanish non-lucrative visa, for example, golden visa or digital nomad visa, you may have to pay the Spanish wealth tax. One of the taxes that has caused the most talk in recent months is this one. It is a tax that it is levied on the personal assets of individuals and is calculated taking into account the value of all their assets. However, it does not work the same in all autonomous communities or comunidades autónomas, as it is a tax that tends to disappear in neighboring countries. In this article, we will describe what this tax is and how the wealth tax works in Spain. What is it? The wealth tax is a direct tax associated with individuals and their wealth. Taxes the set of goods on rights of economic content of which the taxpayer is the owner, with deduction of the charges and liens that decrease their value, as well as the personal debts and obligations for which the owner must respond. The wealth tax law is governed by the Law 19/1991 of June 6, and its management is autonómico. As we said, each comunidad autónoma applies it in different ways, so we will see that there are very big differences depending on where you live, where you're a tax resident. So, wealth tax versus the personal income tax. It's critical to understand how the wealth tax differs from the personal income tax, or IRPF. While the IRPF levies annual income, the wealth tax is computed by taking into account the value of each person's personal assets, with some exceptions. Therefore, the two taxes complement each other. Basically, if you are liable for both of them, you will have to pay both of them. How is the wealth tax then calculated? The wealth tax accrues on December 31st each year. This means that the assets that are taken into account are those that the taxpayer possesses on that specific date. To comply with the tax obligation, it's necessary to present the Modelo 714, following the same tax calendar applicable to the income statement. When accounting for your assets, certain assets are easy to value, like bank accounts, share, investment funds. In the case of real estate, the situation is complicated and we must take the maximum value between the cadastral value. You can find that when you receive the receipt of your IBI or Impuesto sobre Bienes Inmuebles for a specific property, the determined or verified value by the administration for the purposes of other taxes, for example, the tax on patrimonial transfers, and the last one, the price, consideration, or acquisition value. Regarding debts, they will be valued at the nominal value on the tax accrual date and can only be deducted when duly justified. Lastly, if you wonder what are the assets that are part of your wealth and that therefore they must be accounted for in order to assess whether or not you are subject to the payment of the tax, in general there are important exceptions. You must account for your real estate, your bank deposits, your shares or shares in your own funds, your life insurance and temporary or life annuities, your jewelry, furs, art objects and antiques, your vehicles of more than 125 cubic centimeters, aircrafts and boats, or your real rights and administrative concessions. The wealth tax is regulated by each of the Spanish autonomous communities. For many people, it is an unknown tax since, in practice, it does not apply in all autonomous communities in Spain, nor the majority of Spaniards, since its management is ceded to each community and is designed to tax the big fortunes. Only after certain amounts, normally high, it is necessary to present the corresponding model or form and pay, where appropriate, the amount stipulated by the regulations of the autonomy where the taxpayer pays his taxes. This is the reason why there may be different minimum exceptions in each autonomy. It is also possible to apply different deductions and allowances, define different tax rates, and, in practice, eliminate the application entirely, as is the case of the wealth tax in Community of Madrid or Andalucía, where there is a 100% bonus deduction for this tax. Later on in the article and this video, you will see a map with the Comunidades Autónomas deductions for this tax. It is precisely the great regional differences that led the government to propose a unification of this tax and finally to design the new tax on great fortunes, with which assets of more than 3 million euros will be taxed so that they cannot be exempted by the bonuses of regional governments. That means that in Madrid and Andalusia, where the 100% bonus deduction is applied, they will want to basically take away this exemption so that people living in those comunidades autónomas also pay for their wealth. So here we can see in this article, this is a bit long, there are 17 comunidades autónomas, I'm not going to read all of them. If you want to see the specific cases for this tax in each of the comunidades autónomas, you can go to the article, you will find the link in the video description below. But the most important, as we said, is Madrid and Andalusia. They have a tax exemption of 100%. Here you can see in dark blue, and here in yellowish, orange, cream color, you can see deductions of starting at 50% of the wealth tax, and in red there are no deductions. This includes Canary Islands, that is not here in this map. How much money does Spain's wealth tax bring into the state? Taking data from 2019, which is the last year from which we have official figures, in that year only 212,000 declarations were filed for an average net worth of almost 3.5 million euros. The collection for this tax was 1.2 billion euros, which is a very small amount compared to the 86.9 billion euros corresponding to personal income tax and 71.5 billion euros corresponding to VAT that very same year. So it is extremely small percentage. Only 1.2 billion versus 86.9 or 72 billion euros. Who must pay the wealth tax? In general, you must comply with these regulations of your autonomous community before presenting the model, and although there are some lines marked at the state level that can guide you, be careful because they may not work that way in your autonomy. It is best to go to a tax advisor to avoid errors and contemplate any particularity that benefits you. It is best to go to a tax advisor to avoid, for example, the exemption of certain assets, different minimum exemptions for people with disabilities, etc. There is a state exemption of 300,000 euros that applies to the habitual residence. Therefore, only the value that exceeds this amount will be counted as assets, as well as the properties you own that you don't constitute your habitual residence. And also another thing, once these 300,000 euros have been deducted, if your home is worth less, you simply will not have to count it as part of your assets. There is a minimum general exemption of 700,000 euros, which applies regardless of the above exemption, listed in each of the comunidades autónomas. Keep in mind that in some autonomies, this exempt minimum varies and may be lower. For example, in Catalonia is 500,000 euros and in Aragon 400,000 euros. In principle, unless your regional law says otherwise, only if you overcome these two barriers will you be subject to this tax, and you must present the corresponding model, but there is an exemption. You will be obliged to declare the wealth tax when your gross assets, that is, without discounting your debts and previous exemptions, exceeds 2 million euros. So that number you have to put it in your head, remember 2 million euros, and you will have to declare the tax and then see if there are any deductions on this tax. In order to know if you are subject to the Spanish wealth tax, you must add the value of all your assets and rights, discounting the exempt minimums, as well as your debts. You will thus obtain the taxable base, and to this sum, to which you must apply the different tax rates applicable to each section. You can also apply the corresponding bonuses or deductions. Also keep in mind that in the case of marriages in gananciales regime, which is profit regime or joint marital property basis regime, the assets of the marriage belong to each of the parties at 50%. Once the assets are divided between the two, each of the members of the couple can calculate whether or not they are subject separately. The exceptions are not divided, but are applied in full to each person. For example, if there is a home worth 400,000 euros owned by the joint venture, both of you will be exempt since 200,000 euros that correspond to each part of the couple do not exceed the exempt minimum of 300,000 euros that applies to each of you. And let's also remember the Beckham Law, or Ley Beckham Wealth Tax Exemption is a special tax regime. And as we describe in our article, the Beckham Law, How to Pay Less Taxes in Spain as a Foreigner, if you adhere to the Beckham Law special tax regime, the Spanish wealth tax will only apply for the assets located within Spain, which can be an important consideration for those who have assets in other countries. This special tax regime is going to be very popular, especially among digital nomads who come to live to Spain that potentially can benefit from this beneficial tax regime. And I strongly recommend you to visit the article about the Beckham Law, because it's very interesting, especially if you weren't a resident in Spain for a few years. You could adhere to this special tax regime, so you can access lower tax rates, 24%, instead of a progressive tax rate on your gains, on what you earn, that can reach up to 48%. You can become part of a Spainguru community today. You can join our Facebook groups. The most important one is Spain Immigration and Residency Questions, Spainguru.es, with 17,000 members. And we also have a dedicated Facebook group for Spanish non-lucrative visa with nearly 2,000 members, and for the Spanish digital nomad visa with 1.2 thousand members. And if you need expert professional advice, you can just go to Spainguru.es and go to the top menu. There you will find immigration experts, relocation agencies, tax advisors, sworn translators, and health insurances for applications of all the Spanish visas like non-lucrative visa, golden visa, student visa, digital nomad visa, also medical certificates and travel health insurances. Last but not least, I highly recommend you to join our weekly newsletter that we send every single Monday morning with tons of information, questions and answers, featured blog posts, featured news, and also videos from our YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching.